Coming up on Arirang News, it's the start of a national holiday in Korea. Millions of people hitting the roads and flying to see family. That means special virus precautions like at highway rest stops, where food will be takeout only. South Korea's industrial production fell in August from the month before amid a resurgence of the coronavirus. Retail sales, though, were up. And the Deputy U.S. Secretary of State, Stephen Biegun, says his meeting this week with South Korea's top nuclear negotiator was creative and constructive. Among other things, they discussed the recent killing of a South Korean man by North Korean troops. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The Chuseok holiday starts tomorrow, and so that means heavy traffic starting tonight as people hit the road. This evening, our Han Sung-woo is standing by at the Seoul Tollgate, which is a major thoroughfare for cars leaving the city. Sung-woo, how are the roads looking so far?
Hi, Devin. Behind me are cars passing through Seoul Tollgate to branch off to different parts of the country via the nation's major highways. Including the coming weekend, the five-day Chuseok holiday begins on Wednesday, but as you can see, congestion isn't as worse as you would expect it to be. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport predicts almost 27.6 million people will travel across the nation from Tuesday until the end of the long holiday on Sunday. That's a 14% decrease from last year's exodus of nearly 32 million.
So, Sung-woo, it looks like traffic is still building up at this point, but with fewer cars expected on the roads this year, will that mean faster travel times?
On average, yes, but not by too much. The journey from Seoul to Busan will still take 6.5 hours, a bit longer than the 5 hours it would normally take. But as the traffic situation worsens tomorrow, it is expected to climb up to 8 hours or more. And as public transportation usage is projected to drop due to COVID-19 health concerns, more passenger cars will be out on the roads. According to a Korea Transport Institute survey, just over 90% of respondents said they would be traveling in private vehicles. In stark contrast, buses and trains combined accounted for less than 8%. The Transport Ministry says congestion will be at its worst Wednesday morning and Saturday afternoon. That's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more in the later newscast.
All right, Sung-woo, thank you for that. We'll be looking forward to it. And the millions traveling for the holiday will encounter some special rules when they stop at highway rest areas. Now, that means for the next 6 days, there'll be no dining at the restaurants there, only takeout. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
South Koreans hit the road every Chuseok holiday to visit their families across the country. This year, though, the Transport Ministry predicts that the number of those traveling will decrease by 30% on year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. People who have still decided to travel are choosing to take their own vehicles, which means that they'll be visiting rest areas along the expressway. To minimize the risk of more COVID-19 infections, the South Korean government has decided not to waive the expressway toll this holiday and has applied further special virus prevention guidelines from September 29th to October 4th. Travelers wishing to use the rest area facilities during that period will be required to sign a visitor's log, use a QR code, or call ahead using a virtual number to check in beforehand. Temperatures will also be checked upon entry. During the Chuseok holiday, people won't be allowed to dine in at rest area cafes and restaurants. Rather, they should get a takeout and eat it in their cars. The government is advising people to wear face masks when in a car with those who are not family members and to constantly ventilate the air inside the car. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
And now standing by at Gimpo International Airport, another major travel hub today, is our Kim Yongsung. Yongsung, normally there would be massive crowds at the airport a day before Chuseok, but how are things looking there this year?
Hi, Devin. So there are no international flights departing from Gimpo Airport today. And as you know, public health officials have been consistently advising against domestic travel. But even so, the airport looks quite packed. Korea Airports Corporation estimates around 700,000 visitors to visit the 14 airports in South Korea, not counting Incheon International during the holiday period. That's about 25% fewer compared to Chuseok last year. But here at Gimpo Airport, I'm not seeing a significant dent in the number of people. While there is still a large number of people visiting family, many here today have told me that they're using the time off to go on vacation. The most popular destination seems to be Jeju Island, since overseas travel is no longer an option. More than half of the flights departing from Gimpo Airport today are headed to Jeju. The island's Tourism Association is expecting almost 200,000 tourists during Chuseok this year, not too dissimilar from last year, when around 230,000 people made the trip.
So, Yongsung, a substantial holiday business on the domestic routes then. What kind of COVID-19 prevention measures are being taken there at Gimpo?
Well, as one would expect, the airport staff are quite meticulous when it comes to disinfection work. The entire airport is disinfected at least once a day, and facilities that are most frequented by passengers are disinfected at least 3 times a day. There are also thermal imaging cameras carrying out temperature checks as people arrive for check-in. And there's also a palm registration system. Travelers can identify themselves by placing the palm of their hands on the reader so they can go through security without having to take off their masks. But it is strongly advised to sanitize your hands after coming into contact with one of the screens. Well, that's all I have for now, Devin. Back to you.
All right, Kim Young-sun reporting there. Thank you for that. In other news, Seoul's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon and his American counterpart Stephen Biegun met in Washington on Monday to discuss pending issues on the Korean peninsula. Biegun said their talks were creative and constructive. Yoon Jung-min reports.
U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun said his talks with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hoon were creative. Speaking to reporters on Monday, he said they discussed constructive ways to continue advancing their diplomacy on the Korean peninsula. On North Korea, Biegun urged Pyongyang to engage in talks as well.
The U.S. and ROK cannot do this by ourselves. We need the DPRK engaged, and we remain open to that discussion with them when they're prepared.
Biegun said the two sides also discussed the killing last week of a South Korean national by North Korean soldiers in the West Sea, saying it was something deeply disturbing to the Korean people and to the U.S. Seoul's top nuclear envoy commented that of their recent talks, this round was the best and that their cooperation will continue.
I believe South Korea-US cooperation is crucial now more than at any other time. Deputy Secretary Biegun and I have agreed to continue our talks through various channels.
Lee and Biegun also discussed issues related to denuclearization on the Korean peninsula, though they did not release details. This may have included the declaration of an official end to the Korean War, which to this day is suspended only by an armistice. The idea was suggested last week by South Korean President Moon Jae-in in his speech to the virtual UN General Assembly. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea's industrial output fell in August for the first time in 3 months. But despite the resurgence of COVID-19, consumption was up. According to statistics, Korea industrial production was down 0.9% from the month before, with a decline in manufacturing of 0.7% and in services of 1%. As for consumption, retail sales were up 3% from a month earlier, led by sales of home appliances. Facility investment fell 4.4% on month, led by declines in machinery and transport equipment. The recent surge in COVID-19 cases caused business sentiment among South Korean companies to fall for the first time in 5 months in September. Data from the Bank of Korea show that the business sentiment index for all industries stood at 64, down 2 points from the previous month. A reading below 100 indicates that pessimists outnumber optimists. By sector, sentiment among non-manufacturing businesses fell 4 points on month to 62, the most pessimistic being leasing services and wholesale and retail industries. But sentiment among manufacturers edged up 2 points to 68, mostly thanks to a pickup in the price of steel products. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, stocks in New York started the week higher on hope for new stimulus measures. This time leading the S&P higher were energy and financials, which have been struggling. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, U.S. market recovered 2 days in a row. That the Dow Jones gained about 1.5%. The S&P 500 was up about 1.6%, and Nasdaq added highest of 1.9%. Clearly, the news of the possible additional talk for the policies, the fiscal policy support, is making the market to go up further. And market was pretty much led by banks, energy, and tech sectors. And if you look into the details of this, Nancy Pelosi expressed some optimism that the lawmakers can still reach a deal on another relief bill, saying that she and the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin agreed to resume talks. But of course, it's not something that's set in stone yet. And based on that sentiment, market has risen. With this kind of news, we did see dollar extending its losses, going down to slightly towards the 94 territory, because obviously this kind of additional boosting measures would have further burden on the fiscal policy side and the overall budget side. Now, having said that, if you look into the future, we are looking into the Brexit talks in Europe and also the presidential election debate, the first one between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. After this probably debate, we will figure out what kind of implication would have depending who will win the election. Of course, we need to keenly watch what's happening in terms of the boosting measure in regards to the COVID-19 incident, as well as the long-term future fourth industrial revolution related sectors, how much of the additional support we'll see from the government side.
Well, Korean stocks were higher today, too, and by quite a bit. This, of course, is the last session until next week. What was driving the trade today in Seoul?
Yes, as you said, the Kospi was up about 8.6%, and Kosdaq was up another 1.46%. Clearly, people were concerned about the current condition of Korea because the event that is happening in regards to the taxes, the large shareholders requirement, or I guess the rule is supposed to be 1 billion Korean won. That might go down to probably 0.3 billion. If that's the case, then a lot of the local investors might be selling the Korean market, and there was a major concern about the supply and demand side of the Korean market. And also the BTS company, the big hit, the listing will be coming through, and a lot of money is flowing into that, the IPO market, and estimation is as much as $90 billion or 100 trillion won, Korean won, is flowing into that, and obviously that liquidity is kind of putting pressure on Korean equity market in the last about week or so. But in the last 2 days, Korean market did rebound quite significantly because we see continuation of ample liquidity in the system, and also we are seeing the earnings expectations forecast revising up for both Kospi and Kosdaq, and clearly that is putting some great news to the market that we need a fundamental improvement in order for the market to go up further.
And briefly, if you could address these figures we got out today with the resurgence of COVID-19, industrial production down in August, retail sales, though, higher. Tell us about that and what stands out to you.
Yes, I mean, it's quite mixed numbers. If you look at the South Korea's industrial output, it fell. And then you look at the retail sales, it has risen. And in terms of the business confidence index, it's coming in quite nicely, but the consumer confidence is very, very poor. All in all, it is showing that this COVID-19 is having a widespread of implications for Korean equity market as well as Korean economy. We think that the continuation of boosting measure is necessary, and also we need to see global economy recovering in order for Korea export to pick up. All in all, we don't see any clear picture at the current point in time. But nevertheless, we don't see the market or the economy to tank more, but rather it might be stabilizing from the very weak bottom. And we need to see some more indication from the various side of the economy that the economic recovery could happen into next year. We'll watch closely in terms of what's happening to the fiscal policy as well as monetary policy in the future.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. Have a safe and happy holiday.
Thank you very much. You too.
The K-pop boy band BTS and their hit song Dynamite have reclaimed the top spot on the Billboard main singles chart. The song debuted last month at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 2 weeks before slipping to #2. Now it's back at the top, making it the first song by a duo or group in nearly 2 years to be there for 3 or more weeks. Meanwhile, Big Hit Entertainment said Monday that BTS will release their new album, B, on November 20th. It said the album's a message of hope in the pandemic. It'll be 9 months since their last studio album, A Map of the Soul 7, which came out in February. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.